Alright, RPGs, games that casually eat dozens of hours and still get away with it. Let's talk about them. This isn't some definitive holy list or anything, it's just a bunch of RPGs that actually hit and are worth playing at least once. And yeah, if I miss your favorite, that's fine, drop it in the comments. We're just talking about games we love. Look, we have to talk about Planescape Torment, and I know, looking at it now in 2026 or whenever you're watching this, it looks like an ancient relic that belongs in a museum behind glass. But stick with me here, because this is straight up one of the best written games ever made, period. And I don't say that lightly. It's definitely a little janky, and it is definitely for a type of player, specifically the kind who doesn't mind reading a literal novel's worth of text on a computer screen. But if you can get past the clunky 90s interface and the fact that the combat is basically absolute hot garbage, you are in for something that modern RPGs are still trying to copy and failing at. You play as the Nameless One, this scarred, gray, muscle-bound dude who wakes up in a mortuary with no memory, which sounds like the biggest cliche in the book, right? But the way they handle it is just different. You aren't saving the world, you're just trying to figure out why you can't die and why the universe seems to hate you personally. And the game is straight up just like a philosophy simulator disguised as an isometric RPG. It took me a while to play through, and there is some story, obviously, but most of it really is the raw gameplay of walking around this bizarre world and physically talking to every single person you see, because the dialogue is where the actual game is. It's set in Sigil, the City of Doors, which is this gritty, bizarre hub of the multiverse where you see angels drinking with demons in bars, and it's just such a refreshing break from the typical elves and dwarves fantasy stuff we see everywhere else. And here, it lets you talk your way out of almost every single boss fight, which is wild. I'm serious, you can go through almost the entire game without swinging a weapon if you have the stats for it, and that satisfaction of outsmarting an immortal being just by navigating a dialogue tree is insane. It's definitely a little janky, like I said, but I just walked away really enjoying my time with it, and I think if you like that satisfaction of getting deep into a story and peeling back layers like an onion, Planescape is definitely for you. Just download a few mods to fix the resolution first. Trust me on that, because you don't want to be squinting at text on a 4K monitor. It's a good-ass game, and I'm glad I went back to it. I think I've said it before on this channel, but I really like games that force you to actually learn a skill rather than just handing you superpowers. And this game is the ultimate simulator of being a useless peasant in 1403 Bohemia. You play as Henry, the son of a blacksmith, and unlike every other RPG where you're the Dragonborn or the Chosen One, here you are literally nobody. You can't fight, you can't shoot a bow, you have no charisma, and you can't even read. I'm serious, there is a whole quest where you have to go to a scribe just to learn how to decipher letters in a book, because Henry is just some guy from a village. And that commitment to realism is what makes this thing so special and also so incredibly frustrating. It's definitely a little janky, and it is definitely for a type of player who has the patience to suck at everything before they get good. When you finally win a sword fight against two bandits, it's not because you leveled up and got a perk, it's because you, the player, actually learned the timing and the directional combat system. It's this first-person directional system where you have to aim your swings at 5 different points on the enemy's body. And in the beginning, Henry swings a sword like he's holding a wet noodle. You will get blocked, countered, and beaten into the mud constantly. But that's the point. The game is straight up a medieval life simulator, so you have to actually train with Captain Bernard in the practice ring for hours to unlock combos and master prompts. It's clunky, it's awkward, and the lock-on system can be a nightmare when you're fighting more than one person. But once it clicks, there is this immense satisfaction in landing a perfect master strike that you just don't get in button mashers. And it's not just the fighting. You have to manage your hunger, your energy, and even your hygiene. If you walk into a town covered in blood and mud, people won't want to talk to you, or they'll treat you like a criminal. You have to go to bathhouses to clean up, to pass speech checks. It sounds tedious on paper, and sometimes it really is, especially the save system, where you have to drink savior schnapps to save your game manually, which gets you drunk, by the way. But all these little friction points add up to a world that feels incredibly grounded and real. The world itself is just a good-ass video game world to get lost in. The forests in this game are some of the most realistic I've ever seen, and I don't mean just graphically, but the way they're laid out feels like real woodlands rather than a video game level. You can just get lost wandering between villages, hunting rabbits or looking for bandit camps. But again, it comes with that Euro-jank territory. You're gonna see textures pop in, you're gonna see horses getting stuck on fences, and you're gonna see NPCs doing weird stuff. It's rough around the edges. But if you can look past that, the quest design is actually really open-ended. I remember a quest where I had to investigate a murder at a monastery, and instead of just following waypoints, I had to actually join the monks, shave my head, follow their daily schedule of prayer and work, and sneak around at night to find clues. It was mundane, it was slow, but it was totally immersive. Kingdom Come Deliverance doesn't care if you're bored, it cares if the world makes sense. It's a hard sell for a lot of people, but if you want an RPG that drops the fantasy nonsense and just lets you live a historical life with all the grit and dirt that comes with it, this is it. It's a survival game, a detective game, and a night simulator all wrapped up in one messy, beautiful package. We need to have a serious conversation about the original Final Fantasy VII, because while it is easy to dismiss it as just a nostalgia trip or the entry point for a generation of JRPG fans, the reality is that this game represents a seismic shift in how narrative and spectacle could coexist in this medium. You look at it now with those blocky, Popeye-armed character models and the pre-rendered backgrounds that don't always scale well to modern displays, and it might be hard to understand the absolute gravity this thing held in 1997. But the moment you step off that train in the opening bombing mission, you are immediately enveloped in an atmosphere that is practically suffocating in its execution. Midgar isn't just a setting, it is a fully realized industrial nightmare, a dystopian city of steel and Mako energy that feels dirty, lived in, and depressive. The sound design, the steam hissing from pipes, that iconic Uematsu score driving the urgency, it all coalesces to create a sense of place that few games, even with today's photorealistic assets, ever actually manage to replicate. It captures a specific kind of cyberpunk-infused fantasy that feels grounded in societal decay, tackling themes of eco-terrorism, corporate hegemony, and identity that are arguably more relevant today than they were 30 years ago. Mechanically, the Materia system remains one of the most brilliant and malleable progression systems ever devised. Instead of locking characters into rigid archetypes where the healer only heals and the warrior only hits things, Materia allows you to fundamentally rewrite a character's role on the fly by slotting magical orbs into their equipment. It encourages this constant state of experimentation where you are linking support materia to offensive spells to create area of effect attacks, or creating broken combinations that let you counterattack automatically. It gives you this immense tactical freedom to break the game if you are clever enough, which is exactly what you want in a deep RPG. It strikes that perfect balance between accessibility and deep number-crunching strategy, especially when you start tackling the optional super bosses like the weapons, which demand a level of preparation and understanding of the mechanics that will absolutely crush you if you just try to mash the attack command. But the real reason this game endures, the reason we are still talking about it, is the psychological depth of its narrative. You start the game thinking you are playing a cool, aloof mercenary, but as the layers are peeled back, you realize you are dealing with a protagonist who is profoundly broken, suffering from fragmented memories and a severe identity crisis. The way the game handles Cloud Strife's mental state, using him as an unreliable narrator to twist the player's understanding of the events, was revolutionary. It's a story about loss, about the permanence of death in a genre that usually treats resurrection as a cheap consumable item, and about people trying to find a reason to keep fighting when the world is literally ending. Frankly, in the entire history of this medium, there has never been a more cohesive, ambitious, and successfully executed space opera than this trilogy. It is genuinely difficult to overstate just how monumental this collection is, effectively handing you hundreds of hours of interconnected narrative where your specific version of Commander Shepard isn't just a character, but a reflection of a decade-long journey that carries actual, tangible weight. When you boot this up, you aren't just playing 3 separate games, you are committing to a continuous, sprawling arc where a decision you make in the first 5 hours of the first game regarding a minor species or a squad mate can have catastrophic or triumphant repercussions 60 hours later in the third game. The heart of this experience, and the reason it resonates so profoundly with so many people, is unequivocally the characters. We talk a lot about writing in games, but Mass Effect excels at creating digital companions that feel like genuine, complex individuals rather than just stat blocks or walking exposition dumps. You spend so much time with characters like Garrus, Tali, and Liara that by the time you reach the Citadel DLC in the third game, the camaraderie feels earned and authentic in a way that is actually kind of startling. You aren't just completing loyalty missions to unlock a new ability or a costume, you are doing it because you are genuinely invested in their personal struggles, their trauma, and their redemption. The suicide mission in Mass Effect 2 remains, in my opinion, one of the greatest climaxes in gaming history because it perfectly synthesizes narrative stakes with gameplay mechanics. If you didn't put in the work, if you didn't upgrade your ship, if you didn't get to know your crew, people die permanently. That sense of consequence creates a tension and an emotional buy-in that is completely unrivaled. It transforms the experience from a standard save the galaxy trope into a deeply personal story about leadership, sacrifice, and the burdens of command. And sure, we have to acknowledge the gameplay evolution, which is fascinating to watch unfold in real time as you binge through the trilogy. The first game is still very much a classic RPG with more tactical, stat-heavy shooting, while the second and third games pivot hard into being tight, cover-based shooters that feel snappy and responsive. The biotic powers, throwing Singularis, warping armor, charging across the battlefield, give the combat a rhythmic, chaotic flow that makes you feel like an absolute powerhouse. It is a massive, exhausting, and beautiful saga that leaves you with that heavy, hollow feeling of post-game depression because you don't want to leave that world. Baldur's Gate 3. This is just this absolute towering behemoth of a game that I honestly feel like I'm still unpacking even after hundreds of hours. The thing that really gets me, and what I always try to tell people when I'm pitching this, is that it's not just an RPG. It's like Larian Studios somehow managed to trap a living, breathing dungeon master inside your computer. I've said it before, but I love when a game actually respects your intelligence and lets you be a complete idiot or a total genius, and BG3 does both in spades. You're basically dropped into this world with a mind flayer parasite in your brain, and from that second on, the leash is off. You can follow the main quest, sure, but you can also spend 4 hours just talking to every squirrel and stray cat you find because, and this is the cool part, the game actually has fully voiced dialogue for when you use a Speak with Animals spell. It's that level of ridiculous detail that just makes the world feel so much more tactile and real than your average go here, kill 10 of these kind of questing. The combat is where I think some people might get a little tripped up at first because it is straight up turn-based D&D 5th edition rules. But man, once it clicks, it is so satisfyingly tactical. You're not just mashing buttons. Every move you make is deliberate. You're looking at the environment thinking, okay, if I use my bonus action to shove this goblin off of rafters, does that give my rogue the advantage they need? And the answer is almost always yes. It's got that physics as a weapon feel, where you can stack crates to reach high places, or throw a grease bottle and then light it on fire to create this massive zone of control. And the story, dude, the story is just a massive web of what-ifs. We're talking over 1.3 million lines of dialogue and like 140 hours of cutscenes. What's insane is how a choice you make in the very first hour, like maybe you decide to save a random NPC or you accidentally get someone killed, doesn't just disappear. It ripples through the entire 3-act structure and hits you in the face 60 hours later in Act 3. It's got that same kind of thick-headed perseverance feel I talk about in difficult games, where you're just struggling through these massive, arduous treks, your resources are low, you're desperate for a long rest at one of the 17 different camp locations, but you push through because you need to see how your specific version of the story ends. It's a full meal of a game, and even when it's frustrating or you lose 20 minutes of progress because you forgot to save before a tough boss, that final victory when the music hits perfectly, it's just some of the best stuff in the medium, period. I could yap about this thing all day, but honestly, you just have to dive in and let it consume your life for a month. Skyrim is one of those games that almost doesn't need an introduction anymore, but when you actually sit down and think about why it stuck around for so long, it's because Skyrim nails a very specific fantasy that a lot of RPGs try and fail to capture, which is the feeling of just existing in a world and doing whatever the hell you want at your own pace. The opening is iconic for a reason. You're a prisoner about to get your head chopped off, a dragon shows up, everything goes to shit, and suddenly you're free. From that moment, the game basically shrugs and says, alright, go live your life. You can chase the main quest and deal with dragons and destiny, or you can immediately fuck off in the opposite direction and become a thief, an assassin, a mage, a blacksmith, a werewolf, a vampire, or some unholy combination of all of that. Skyrim's greatest strength is how little it pressures you. The world design is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Skyrim is dense in a way that feels natural. You're constantly stumbling into caves, ruins, forts, random encounters, and side quests just by walking in a direction. Even when you know the map by heart, there's still something comforting about roaming through snowy mountains, pine forests, and ancient Nordic ruins while the ambient music quietly does its thing. The game understands vibes better than most RPGs. It knows when to shut up and let the atmosphere carry the experience. The progression system is deceptively simple, and that's why it works. You get better at what you actually do. Swing a sword, you get better at swinging swords. Cast spells, sneak around, pick locks, craft gear, all of it levels naturally. It makes experimenting feel good, and it avoids that rigid class structure that locks you into a role early. You can start as a stealth archer, accidentally become a stealth archer again, and somehow that still feels fine every single time. Combat is pretty straightforward and honestly a little clunky, especially up close. Melee lacks weight, animations can feel stiff, and enemy AI isn't exactly brilliant, but Skyrim makes up for it with flexibility. You can approach fights however you want. Dual wielding, sword and shield, magic in one hand, weapon in the other, full mage, full stealth, bow from a mile away, whatever. The systems are loose enough that you can kind of roleplay your way through encounters rather than relying purely on mechanics. The main quest is fine, it's there. Dragons are cool, shouting is fun, but it's rarely the reason people fall in love with the game. Where Skyrim really shines is how personal it becomes over time. Everyone has their own version of Skyrim, their own character, their own house, their own routines, their own dumb stories. The game is basically a fantasy sandbox that quietly becomes a comfort game for a lot of people. You boot it up, wander around, do a couple of quests, maybe mod it until it breaks, and suddenly 6 hours are gone. And yeah, the mod scene is a huge part of why Skyrim is still relevant. You can turn it into a hardcore survival sim, a next-gen looking RPG, a goofy meme playground, or something that feels like an entirely new game. Mods didn't save Skyrim, but they absolutely extended its lifespan into something ridiculous. It's not the deepest RPG in terms of choices and consequences, and the writing isn't as sharp as something like New Vegas, but that's not what Skyrim is trying to be. It's about freedom, immersion, and letting you live in a fantasy world on your own terms. There's a reason people keep coming back to it more than a decade later. Skyrim just gets under your skin and stays there. Fallout New Vegas is one of those games where the longer you've spent with it, the harder it hits, because on the surface it looks like another Fallout. Janky Bethesda-style open world, stiff animations, busted character faces, guns that feel a little floaty, bugs that absolutely should not still exist. But once you're actually in it and living in that Mojave for a while, you realize this thing is operating on a completely different level compared to most RPGs, even within its own franchise. The setup is simple and kind of genius. You start as a nobody courier who gets shot in the head over a stupid poker chip, buried in a shallow grave and left for dead. That's it. No chosen one nonsense, no destiny handed to you, just pure spite and survival. You wake up patched together by a robot doctor in a quiet desert town, and from that moment on, the game just lets you loose. What's wild is how naturally it teaches you the world. You don't get dragged around by the nose. You're introduced to factions, politics, and consequences just by existing in the wasteland and talking to people who actually have opinions and agendas. The writing is the real killer here. New Vegas is still probably the gold standard for RPG dialogue design. Every major faction feels fully thought out. The NCR is this bloated, overextended government trying to cosplay as old-world democracy while slowly collapsing under its own weight. Caesar's Legion is horrifying and brutal, but also disturbingly coherent in its philosophy, which makes dealing with them uncomfortable in the best way. Mr. House is this cold, calculating autocrat who genuinely believes he's humanity's best shot at survival. And the game never tells you who's right, it just shows you the consequences and lets you sit with them. What really sets it apart is how much your character build actually matters. Skills aren't just numbers to make combat easier. They unlock dialogue paths, alternate quest solutions, shortcuts, and sometimes entirely different outcomes. A high-speech character can talk their way through situations that would otherwise end in bloodshed. A science-heavy build can reprogram systems, bypass threats, or uncover hidden layers of the world. Even low-intelligence builds change dialogue in meaningful, often darkly hilarious ways. It's an RPG that genuinely respects the idea of role-playing instead of just being an action game with perk points taped onto it. Combat is fine. Nobody pretends New Vegas has amazing gunplay. It's serviceable. VATS helps a lot, especially early on, and the weapon variety is strong enough to keep things interesting. Ammo types, weapon mods, and perks give combat some depth if you engage with it, but the real strength is that fighting is rarely the most interesting solution. You're usually thinking about positioning, preparation, and whether pulling the trigger is even worth it. The Mojave itself is one of the best RPG worlds ever made, and that's saying something because it's mostly empty desert. It works because the emptiness feels intentional. Towns are spaced out. Travel feels dangerous early on. You learn quickly that wandering into the wrong area will get you absolutely demolished. That sense of place, of learning the map through failure and survival, makes the world feel real. By the time you're strong, you actually understand the land instead of just fast traveling everywhere like a tourist. Yeah, it's buggy, it crashes, animations are stiff, characters stare into your soul with those 1,000-yard Bethesda eyes, but none of that matters once you're deep in it. New Vegas sticks with people because it trusts the player. It trusts you to pay attention, to think, to deal with uncomfortable outcomes, and to define your own version of the wasteland. Even now, years later, with or without, it still holds up because nothing else quite does what New Vegas does this well. It's messy, smart, cynical, and weirdly heartfelt. An absolute must-play if you care about RPGs that actually give a shit about choice and consequence. Okay, so Dragon Age Origins came out in 2009 from BioWare, back when they were just absolutely killing it. And dude, this game still holds up as one of my favorite fantasy RPGs ever. Yeah, the graphics are dated and the combat feels a little clunky now, but there's something about this game that just works, you know? It's got that classic BioWare magic where you get completely sucked into the characters and the story, and your choices actually feel like they matter. So you're in this fantasy world, and there's basically this apocalyptic event called the Blight happening, where these corrupted monsters called Darkspawn are pouring out of the ground, led by this dragon, and you join the Grey Wardens, who are the only ones who can stop it. But here's what's cool. The game starts with one of 6 different origin stories depending on what race and class you pick, and these aren't just short prologues, they're like full hour or 2 stories that are completely different. You can be a human noble whose family gets murdered, a city elf dealing with oppression, a dwarf living in poverty, a mage trapped in a tower, and each one affects how people react to you throughout the whole game. I've replayed this just to see all the origins because they make you feel connected to your character in a way most RPGs don't. But the real star here is the party members. They're all fantastic. You've got Alistair, who's funny and sarcastic, but secretly royalty, Morrigan, who's this cynical witch, Liliana, who's a former assassin turned religious, and more. And they all have opinions about what you're doing, like they'll argue with each other and approve or disapprove of your choices. If you piss them off enough, they'll leave or even betray you, and different companions want completely different things, so you can't please everyone. I love that tension because it makes your decisions feel real. Like Morrigan approves when you're ruthless, while Alistair wants you to be heroic, so someone's always going to be mad. The whole game is full of reactivity like that. NPCs remember what you did, your origin comes up, your race matters, there are different dialogue options based on your background. Like if you're an elf, you face discrimination, if you're a mage, people fear you, and the game acknowledges all of it. The story has you gathering armies to fight the Blight, but that means dealing with all this political stuff. There's a civil war happening, elves are oppressed, mages are locked up because people fear magic, dwarves have a caste system, and you have to navigate all this and make alliances, and every major arc gives you big choices that affect the ending. Do you help the mages or the Templars? Who becomes the next ruler? Do you make the ultimate sacrifice to stop the Blight? The choices at the end are brutal, and they feel earned based on everything you did. The world building is fantastic too. BioWare created this whole world with deep lore about history and religions and cultures, and you learn about it through conversations and codex entries. I spent hours reading codex stuff because it was actually interesting, not just flavor text. And the character customization is deep, with different specializations for each class that completely change how you play. Like warriors can become tanks or berserkers, mages can be blood mages or healers, and you can mix abilities to create unique builds. And yeah, there are some annoying parts, like everyone hates the fade section and inventory management is clunky, but the core experience is so strong. This is classic BioWare at their best, with incredible characters and writing, meaningful choices, tactical combat, great lore, and that feeling of being completely invested in your role in this world. It came out the same era as Mass Effect, and it's like their last classic CRPG before they streamlined things in the sequels. If you're into dark fantasy RPGs with great characters and choices that matter, Dragon Age Origins is a must-play, easily one of the best RPGs ever made. Chrono Trigger is one of those games that gets talked about like a sacred relic, and somehow it actually earns that reputation. You go in expecting it to feel old, maybe a little overrated, and then a few hours pass and you realize why people won't shut up about it. It's tight in a way most RPGs still struggle with. No wasted time, no filler, no grinding for the sake of padding. Everything it does feels deliberate. The setup is super simple. You're just a kid named Chrono who stumbles into time travel because a science fair goes horribly wrong, and from there the game just keeps escalating. You're hopping across different eras, is messing with history, seeing the consequences ripple forward and backward. What's impressive is how clearly the game communicates all of this without drowning you in exposition. You always understand where you are, why it matters, and what's at stake. The party is legendary for a reason. Every character has a strong identity, both in personality and gameplay. Frog isn't just a knight, he's a tragic character carrying guilt and honor in equal measure. Magus starts as this looming villain and slowly becomes something way more complicated. Robo is a straight-up existential crisis wrapped in a robot body. They don't overstay their welcome and none of them feel disposable. The game gives you just enough time with each character to care, then keeps moving. Combat is where Chrono Trigger still feels weirdly modern. The active time battle system keeps fights moving, enemies are visible in the field instead of random encounters, and battles transition seamlessly without breaking the flow. The real standout is the tech system. Dual and triple techs make party composition feel meaningful, and they're not just flashy, they're practical. You're constantly thinking about who works best together instead of just who has the highest stats. The pacing is almost perfect. The game is relatively short compared to modern RPGs, but it feels complete. There's always something new happening, whether it's a new time period, a new mechanic, or a big story beat. And then there's the way it handles choice. Small decisions can lead to different outcomes, alternate endings, and subtle variations that make replaying it genuinely rewarding. New Game Plus was a wild idea at the time, and it still rules. The villain, Lavos, is one of the most effective threats in RPG history because it's not personal in the traditional sense. It's not taunting you every 5 minutes, it just exists as this unstoppable force that represents extinction. Seeing the ruined future it creates is more disturbing than any monologue could be. The game lets that dread sit quietly in the background, and it works. Even now, it's hard to point to anything that does what Chrono Trigger does quite as cleanly. Persona 5 Royal is the kind of game that immediately knows what it wants to be and then commits it so hard that you either bounce off in the first few hours or you get completely consumed for 100+. It's loud, stylish, confident, and somehow still ridiculously heartfelt underneath all the anime flair and jazz music. The setup pulls you in fast. You're a kid falsely accused, tossed into probation, dropped into Tokyo with a criminal record, and basically told to keep your head down or your life is over. Of course, that doesn't happen. Instead, you fall into the metaverse, awaken to your persona, and slowly start assembling this crew of misfits who are all dealing with their own forms of abuse, control, and societal pressure. What makes it work is that the game takes those themes seriously. Authority figures are corrupt, systems are broken, and adults keep failing the people they're supposed to protect. It's angry in a very focused way. The core loop is insanely addictive. By day, you're managing your real life, going to school, building friendships, working part-time jobs, raising social stats, and trying to squeeze every ounce of value out of limited time. By night, you're infiltrating palaces, which are these twisted manifestations of warped desires, and they're some of the best dungeon designs the series has ever had. Each palace has its own identity, mechanics, puzzles, and boss fights that actually feel tailored instead of copy-pasted hallways. Combat is turn-based, but it's fast and aggressive. Hitting enemy weaknesses, chaining baton passes, and wiping entire encounters in seconds feels incredible. It's one of those systems where once it clicks, you feel smart instead of overpowered. Persona Fusion adds another layer, constantly pushing you to experiment and optimize without turning into a spreadsheet nightmare. Royal refines everything, smoothing rough edges, adding quality of life changes, and making the whole thing feel more flexible and forgiving without losing depth. The characters are a huge reason people stick with the game. Every party member has a distinct arc that unfolds both in the main story and through their confidant links. These aren't just side stories, they feed directly into gameplay, unlocking abilities that genuinely change how you play. And they're written with enough care that you actually want to hang out with these people. You're not just grinding stats, you're investing in relationships, and the game rewards that emotionally and mechanically. And the music, yeah, it's absurdly good. Those tracks will live in your head long after you're done. It's long, really long, and it's dialogue heavy. If you don't like reading, managing schedules, or sitting with characters for extended stretches, it might not be your thing. But if you do, it's one of the most rewarding RPG experiences out there. Okay, so Disco Elysium is one of the weirdest, most fascinating RPGs I've ever played. This game came out in 2019 from this small Estonian studio, and it just does things that no other RPG does. Like, there's no combat in this game at all. It's all dialogue and skill checks and investigating this incredibly detailed world. And somehow it's more engaging than most action RPGs I've played. If you're into deep storytelling and don't mind reading a lot of text, this game is absolutely incredible. So you wake up in a trashed hotel room with the worst hangover imaginable, and you literally don't remember anything. Not your name, not what you do, nothing. You're a detective and there's been a murder and you're supposed to be investigating it, but you're also trying to piece together who you are and what happened during your massive bender. And your partner Kim Kitsuragi shows up and he's just this calm professional dude dealing with the fact that you're a complete disaster. The setup is simple, but what the game does with it is wild. The whole game takes place in this one district called Martinez in the city of Revachol, and it's not a huge area, but it's so densely packed with detail and characters and stories. Every single NPC has depth. Every location has history. There are all these political factions and tensions. There's this failed revolution that happened decades ago. There's class struggle and poverty and corruption. And you're just this washed up cop trying to solve a murder while everything around you is falling apart. The world building is insane. Like, the amount of lore and detail they put into this fictional world rivals anything I've seen. Instead of combat, you're doing skill checks for everything. You've got 24 different skills, and they're not normal RPG skills. Like, you've got logic and encyclopedia, which are straightforward enough, but then you've got things like Inland Empire, which is basically your imagination talking to you. Electrochemistry, which is your addiction and desire for substances. Authority, which wants you to assert dominance. Empathy, which picks up on people's emotions. And these skills are constantly talking to you in your head. Like, you'll be having a conversation and different parts of your brain are chiming in with suggestions or observations or just weird tangents. It's like your thoughts are characters and they're all arguing about what you should do. And the wild part is, you can build your detective however you want. You can be a boring, by-the-book cop, or you can be a fascist, or a communist, or an art cop, or a superstar rockstar detective, or just completely unhinged. The game lets you commit to really weird builds, and the dialogue and story adapt to it. I played as this guy who was really into thinking about stuff but had zero physical capabilities, so I'd have these brilliant deductions, but then I'd try to do something simple like reach for an object and my body would just fail me. You can have conversations with inanimate objects, you can become obsessed with a cryptid creature, you can start your own political movement. It's genuinely nuts what this game lets you do. The murder mystery itself is compelling, but it's almost secondary to exploring the world and your own psyche. Like, yeah, you're investigating this dead body hanging behind the hostel, but you're also grappling with existential dread and political philosophy and what it means to be a person. There's no combat, but the skill checks function like challenges, like you'll need to pass a physical instrument check to kick down a door, or a rhetoric check to win an argument, or a perception check to notice a clue. Look, Disco Elysium isn't for everyone. If you need action and combat, you're gonna be bored, because this is all reading and dialogue. The pacing is slow and contemplative. You spend a lot of time just walking around and talking to people and thinking. But if you're into deep RPGs with incredible writing and unique mechanics and a world that feels alive, this game is a masterpiece. Divinity Original Sin 2 is one of those RPGs where the first few hours don't fully prepare you for how deep the rabbit hole actually goes. At the start, it looks like a classic top-down CRPG. Lots of text, turn-based combat, stats everywhere, dialogue choices flying at you non-stop. It feels dense, maybe even intimidating. And then, somewhere along the way, usually once you've completely ruined a fight by accidentally setting the entire battlefield on fire, it clicks. You realize this game, it's actively daring you to break it in creative ways. The opening on Fort Joy is honestly one of the best tutorial areas ever made, even if you don't realize it at the time. You're stripped of your source powers, trapped on an island prison, and the game immediately starts testing you. How do you escape? Who do you trust? Do you help people out of kindness, curiosity, or because you think they might be useful later? The wild part is that almost every NPC feels like they matter in some way, even the ones that seem minor at first. The writing is where Divinity Original Sin 2 really flexes. Every origin character feels like a full protagonist, not just a party member. Fane, Losi, Sibyl, Red Prince, Ethan, Beast. These aren't just stat sticks with backstories. They are deeply woven into the world and the main narrative. Picking who you play as versus who you recruit actually changes how the story unfolds, and not in a fake cosmetic way. Dialogues change, quests resolve differently, certain story beats hit way harder depending on who's in your party and what choices you've made. It's one of the few RPGs where replaying as a different character genuinely feels like a different perspective on the same world. Combat is the star of the show, and it's absurdly good. It's turn-based, but it never feels slow once you understand the systems. Positioning matters, height matters, surfaces matter a lot. Fire, poison, oil, water, blood, electricity, ice, all of it interacts in ways that feel almost like a physics puzzle. You're not just attacking enemies, you're manipulating the battlefield. You're teleporting enemies into lava, freezing the ground under their feet, setting traps, chain-reacting elemental effects, and sometimes accidentally nuking your own party because you got a little too confident. It's chaos, but it's controlled chaos, and when a fight goes well, it feels earned. Outside of combat, the game gives you an insane amount of freedom. You can talk your way through situations, sneak around problems, steal, manipulate, betray, or just straight up murder your way forward if that's the kind of character you're playing. And the game doesn't judge you for it. It reacts, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes by completely blowing up your plans hours later. Choices echo through the entire campaign, and not always in ways you expect. Okay, so Gothic 1 and 2. These games came out in the early 2000s from this German studio Piranha Bytes, and dude, they're janky as hell. Like, I'm warning you right now, the controls are weird, the combat feels clunky, the graphics are dated even for when they came out, but if you can get past that jank, there's something really special here. These games have this lived-in world that feels more real than most modern open-world RPGs, and once you get sucked in, it's hard to stop playing. So Gothic 1 starts with you being thrown into this prison colony that's surrounded by a magical barrier. Nobody can get out, and the kingdom is using it as a giant mining operation for magical ore. But the prisoners have formed their own factions and society inside. There's the old camp that works with the guards, the new camp that's rebelling, and the swamp camp that's doing their own weird religious thing. And you're just this nameless guy trying to survive and figure out what's going on. And the way the game drops you in with no hand-holding is brutal but incredible. Like, NPCs will beat the crap out of you if you mouth off. Monsters will destroy you if you wander into the wrong area. You have to actually learn the world and earn your place in it. The world design in Gothic 1 is fantastic. The whole colony is this seamless open area with no loading screens, and everything is connected in this organic way. You've got the camps, the forests, caves, ruins, and it all feels handcrafted. NPCs have routines, they wake up, go to work, eat meals, go to sleep, and if you attack someone, their friends will jump in to help them. The world feels alive in a way that most RPGs don't. Like, these people exist whether you're there or not. And the factions actually matter. You have to pick a side and join one of the camps, and each one has different quests and benefits and philosophies. Gothic 2 continues the story after you escape the colony, and now you're in the kingdom of Corinius, dealing with orcs and dragons threatening the land. The world is way bigger. There's a whole city and countryside and expanded areas, and they refined a lot of the mechanics from the first game. The faction system is even deeper. You can join the paladins or the fire mages or the militia or become a mercenary, and your choice affects your whole playthrough. The Knight of the Raven expansion adds even more content and a pirate section and raises the difficulty, which makes it even more challenging. The combat in these games is rough, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's this timing-based system where you click to attack and you can do combos if you time it right, and you can block and dodge, but it feels stiff and awkward, especially at first. Early game, you're so weak that basic wolves and goblins will destroy you. Like, you have to actually run away from fights and come back later when you're stronger. But that's part of what makes it satisfying. When you finally get good gear and skills and you can take down enemies that used to wreck you, it feels earned. You really feel your character's progression from weakling to badass. The progression system is cool because you don't just level up and auto-improve, you have to find trainers to teach you skills, and it costs money and learning points. Want to increase your strength? Find a trainer and pay them. Want to learn how to use a bow? Find an archery teacher. Want to learn magic? Join the mages and they'll teach you spells. Everything requires investment and choice. You can't just max out everything, you have to specialize. And different factions give you access to different trainers and abilities, so your faction choice really shapes your build. The world design is gorgeous in its own rough way, and there's this sense of danger and mystery everywhere. Nighttime is legitimately scary because strong monsters come out and you can barely see, so you're huddled by a campfire waiting for dawn. Exploring a dungeon feels tense because you don't know what's around the corner, and healing items are scarce, so every fight matters. Now, here's the thing. The controls in UI are notoriously bad. Like, the default control scheme is bizarre and you'll want to rebind everything immediately. The English voice acting is rough, some of the translations are awkward, and there are bugs and jank all over the place. But the community has made patches and mods that fix a lot of issues and improve the experience. So if you play these games, definitely look up the community patches and maybe some texture mods. Look, Gothic 1 and 2 are cult classics for a reason. They do immersive sim RPG stuff better than almost anyone. The world feels real and reactive, the progression is satisfying, the exploration is rewarding, and once you get past the initial learning curve and jank, they're incredibly engaging. These games influenced the Witcher series and a bunch of other European RPGs, and you can see why. If you want that feeling of being dropped into a living, breathing world where you have to actually survive and earn your place, Gothic is amazing. Just go in knowing it's going to be rough at first and you need to push through that initial barrier, and you'll find something really special. Absolute classics, some of the best immersive RPGs ever made, even with all the jank. If we're talking about the best RPGs, we have to talk about Kenshi, because this is a game that is straight up unlike anything else you've ever played. It's definitely a certain type of game for a certain type of player, and my best pitch really is that it's a suffering simulator that eventually turns into one of the most rewarding power trips in gaming. You start off as absolutely nothing. I mean, you are less than nothing. You're a person in a massive, uncaring, post-apocalyptic desert, and you are nowhere near equipped to handle even a single hungry bandit. It's got that raw gameplay loop where you start at the bottom and physically, over the course of dozens or even hundreds of hours, you carve out a life for yourself. It's brutal, it's ugly, and it is definitely a little janky, but man, it is just a good-ass game. The thing about Kenshi that really calls to me is how it handles progression. It's not about following a golden path or a main quest, because there basically isn't one. The story is the journey you create yourself. You might start out just trying to find enough food to not starve to death, but then you realize you can mine copper to make a few cats, buy some dried meat, and maybe recruit one other person so you're not alone in the wastes. But then you get jumped, you lose a limb, literally, your character's limbs can be chopped off, and suddenly the game changes. Now you're looking for a robotic replacement, and you start to think like a survivor. You're assessing every horizon, looking for the tiniest bit of safety or a scrap of resources. It has that specific kind of arduous trek feeling that you get in games like Death Stranding, where just getting from point A to point B feels like a massive achievement. And it's a full meal of a game, because it's not just an RPG, it's a base builder, a squad-based RTS, and a survival game all mashed together. You have to manage your hunger and your thirst, and everything you do is deliberate. If you decide to build a base, you're not just placing walls, you're starting a faction. You're attracting the attention of holy nations or cannibal tribes, and you have to use strategy to survive. You have a limited amount of resources, and it's always a balancing act of how much you use to keep your squad from dying. I struggled for a significant portion of my early hours because it's hard to get the hang of it, and it can be incredibly frustrating and tedious when you lose someone you've spent 10 hours training. But there is something about that continued, thick-headed, stupid perseverance that makes the eventual victory feel so much better. The world building is also incredible because it's so quiet. You find remnants of old civilizations, and instead of a 5-minute cutscene, you find a ruined laboratory or a dropped backpack with a note from someone who didn't make it. Those small, poignant anecdotes do a better job of setting the mood than any big-budget cinematic could. You're exploring this world that wasn't meant for you, and when you finally manage to build a self-sustaining city in the middle of a literal death pit, you realize the game did a perfect job of simulating that feeling of overcoming the odds. It's a 100-hour journey that leaves you exhausted but immensely satisfied. Honestly, if you like games that let you put your own thoughts and motivations into the character's journey, Kenshi is something you absolutely have to check out. This is a game that actually lived up to the hype and then some, and it's still sitting there as like this monumental achievement in RPG design that other games are still trying to match. So you play as Geralt of Rivia, and if you don't know who that is by now, I don't know where you've been, but he's a witcher, he's a monster hunter, basically a mutant with enhanced abilities, and he's out there hunting monsters for coin. But the main story here is way more personal than that. You're searching for Ciri, who's basically Geralt's adopted daughter, and she's being hunted by this otherworldly force called the Wild Hunt. And that's the setup, right? But what CD Projekt Red does with that setup is just absolutely insane. First off, let's talk about the world. The world in The Witcher 3 is massive, like genuinely massive. You've got multiple regions. You've got Velen, which is this war-torn, swampy, depressing hellscape where people are just trying to survive. You've got Novigrad, this massive city that feels alive in a way that most open-world cities just don't. You've got Skellige, which is these gorgeous islands with Viking-inspired culture and some of the most beautiful vistas I've seen in a video game. And then you've got smaller areas like White Orchard at the beginning, and if you get the DLCs, which you absolutely should, you get Tucson, which is like this fairy tale wine country that's just stunning. But here's the thing that really gets me about The Witcher 3's world. It's not just big for the sake of being big. Every location feels intentional, like you're not just riding through empty space to get to the next quest marker. There's stuff everywhere. There are little villages with their own problems. There are monster nests. There are bandit camps. There are hidden treasures. There are contracts on notice boards. And the crazy part is that so much of this side content is actually really well written and interesting. The combat in The Witcher 3 is... okay, look, I'm gonna be real with you. It's not perfect. When this game came out, a lot of people complained that the combat felt clunky or floaty, and I get that. It's not as tight as something like Dark Souls or Bloodborne. Geralt's movement can feel a little loose, and sometimes the camera in tight spaces is rough. But here's the thing. Once you get used to it and you learn the systems, the combat is actually really satisfying in its own way. You've got two swords, a steel sword for humans and regular animals, and a silver sword for monsters. You've got 5 signs, which are basically magic spells: Igni for fire, Ard for a force push, Quen for a shield, Yrden for a trap, and Axii for mind control. You've got bombs, you've got potions, you've got oils you can apply to your swords for extra damage against specific enemy types. And when you're actually playing well, using all these tools together, it feels awesome, like you're preparing for a fight by meditating and applying the right oils and drinking the right potions. Then you're dodging and rolling and using signs at the right moments, and it all comes together in this dance where you feel like an actual professional monster hunter. The preparation aspect is huge, too. You can just run into fights, sure, but if you actually read the bestiary entries and learn about the monsters you're fighting, you can prepare specifically for them. Fighting a griffin? Better use Yrden to trap it in the physical world. Fighting a griffin? Probably want to use Ard to knock it out of the sky. And on the higher difficulties, this preparation becomes essential. Nier Automata is hard to even describe what makes it special without spoiling stuff, but I'll try. On the surface, it looks like this stylish action game with anime androids fighting robots, and yeah, that's part of it, but it's also this philosophical, existential experience that will mess with your head and your emotions in ways you don't expect. This is one of those games where if you only play through it once, you've barely scratched the surface, and by the end, it'll have you thinking about consciousness and meaning and what it means to be alive. So the setup is Earth has been overrun by machines sent by aliens. Humanity has fled to the moon, and you play as these androids called 2B and 9S, who are sent down to fight the machines and reclaim the planet. You've got 2B, who's this combat android with a sword, and she's cool and stoic, and 9S, who's a scanner model that's more curious and emotional, and they're backed up by these little floating robots called pods that shoot and provide support. The combat is done by Platinum Games, so it feels incredible. It's got that fast, fluid action where you're dodging and attacking and juggling enemies, and it just flows beautifully. You can equip different weapons, and they all have different movesets. You can customize your loadout with plug-in chips that give you abilities and buffs, and on higher difficulties, the combat gets genuinely challenging. But here's where Nier gets interesting. The game has multiple routes that you play through, and each one gives you a different perspective and reveals more of the story. Your first playthrough is as 2B, and it's pretty straightforward action game stuff. You're fighting machines and going on missions, and the world is this beautiful post-apocalyptic Earth that's been reclaimed by nature. Then you play Route B as 9S, and you're replaying the same events but from his perspective, and you're hacking into enemies instead of just fighting them, and you start learning more about the machines and realizing they're not just mindless enemies. And then Route C happens, and that's when the game completely shifts and gets dark and philosophical and starts asking these heavy questions about existence and purpose. The machines in this game are fascinating because at first they seem like generic enemies, but as you explore, you find these machine villages where they're trying to mimic human behavior. They're forming communities, they're falling in love, they're creating art, they're worshiping and philosophizing, and you realize they're basically trying to find meaning in existence just like the androids. There are moments where the game breaks the fourth wall and messes with you as a player. The endings get really creative with how they play with game conventions, and by the time you get to ending E, you'll probably be emotional. The final ending sequence is one of the most unique and touching things I've experienced in gaming. It's a statement about helping others and community, and it's just brilliant.